Hey, hey, Sydney Brown here. We are back for chapter 9 of Memoir Mastery, a step-by-step guide to writing your life story. Now, in chapter 9, we're going to talk about legal and ethical considerations. Will say up front, I am not an attorney. I am not giving legal advice. I am not qualified, nor do I claim to be, to give you legal advice. But that said, we're going to cover just some of the basics of any information that you can find on the internet. And I do encourage you to seek legal advice from somebody before you go ahead and publish anything that has any questionable content at all. But we're going to talk about understanding libel and defamation. We're going to talk about protecting privacy and obtaining permission, talking about balancing the truth and fiction. And then we're going to give you the top 10 tips of navigating legal and ethical issues. Now, this is for helpful tips and entertainment only. Like I said, definitely want you to seek legal advice before you publish any personal memoir that involves other people who have not expressly given you their permission. Now that I've said all that, let's see what else we want to talk about. A little bit lighter now. Do me a favor, go ahead and like and subscribe, and put in the comments below, if you will. Let me know how you're liking the content. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you would, that you've subscribed. I appreciate it. And I do come into the comments and try to interact with people as often as possible. We do also have a free writing group that you can come in and join, and I look forward to seeing you there. But for now, let's go ahead and get started on chapter 9. All right, so this is going to be one of those sections that is very important that you pay attention to, but also a little bit spooky. So I really want you to, listen, but use this as your starting point, not as your final destination. When it comes to legal and ethical considerations, you really want to do your own research and seek legal advice on your own for your specific situation. So that being said, let's move on into just some of the basic information that I really want to make sure that you get started with. First would be understanding libel and defamation. There are legal considerations in anything that you would write or say about other people, but specifically when you're doing a memoir, it's your story, and it should have other people and how they impacted your life in there. So it's going to be hard at times to share your story without sometimes being honest that somebody else was the bad guy. And you have to find the way to balance that. But we're going to give you some tips here in a minute as well that can kind of help you through that. But definitely be very careful in this area. Share your story, your honesty, your authenticity. It's not your story to share someone else's actions. So there's a fine balancing act that I just want to make sure that you're aware of. But defamation, defamation is when you make a false statement that harms someone's reputation. So unless you have solid evidence to back up what you're saying, then it's best to just avoid making accusations about somebody. Invasion of privacy is another thing. When you share information about someone, they have the reasonable expectation that, if they told you something, that you were going to keep it private. So you don't tell other people secrets. Don't do that. That's considered an invasion of privacy. If that could be anything about their health, their finances, their personal relationships, their personal beliefs. If they shared it with you in confidence, leave it there. That's the best way to go, in my opinion. If you want to share something about them, and if they have a good relationship with you, ask for permission. If you give permission, then usually that's going to be just totally fine. Another thing to be very cautious about is copyright infringement. That's when when you use someone else's work without their permission. That could include song lyrics, quotes, images, anything like that. You may be thinking that it's respectful to them, but if you don't give them the proper citation or the acknowledgement that it's theirs, then it's actually considered infringement. So be very careful about that. Let's talk about some ethical considerations. This is maybe not as much legal, but ethical. So we got exaggeration. When you embellish the truth for drama, you want to really make it an exciting scene, and that's fine. But is it true? If it's not true and it's about a real person and a real story, you probably don't want to exaggerate it. So don't get crazy with the exaggeration or the embellishments. There is some amount of creative license that you're expected to have in writing your memoir. So you can be a little extra, but don't go too far over the top. And again, consult your own legal for advice on that. Another thing would be misrepresentation. Now that's when you intentionally mislead your readers. And that would include things like changing the details about someone, or the events didn't happen the way you say something that wasn't really true. Don't tell a story that didn't happen just because it's more exciting that way. Now, if you want to fictionalize your truth, then you can do that. And we can talk about that in a different class or in the free writing group, because I know a lot of people who fictionalize different aspects of their lives. And, a lot of people's lives are really exciting. You can come up with a lot of great stories, but then it's fiction. And you make sure that it doesn't even make someone think or wonder, was this real? So but when it's a memoir, you just really need to be careful about things like that. So misrepresentation is a big no-no. Plagiarism, when you use someone else's work without giving them the credit, and we talked about that, about infringement, that's similar. So that's just kind of the basics of the legal stuff, and it can get heavy. I don't want you to be afraid. I want you to be aware and cautious. So don't back out of writing. Don't change your mind. Your story needs to be told. You just need to be honest, authentic, and cautious as you write anything that has other people in the journey. So here's some tips and some ways that you can avoid getting yourself into trouble there. Now, again, this is not legal advice. It's just some common sense tips. Number 1, stick to the truth. The best way to avoid libel and defamation is just say the truth. If it's true and you can show that it's true, then you're good. Don't embellish, don't exaggerate, just stick to the truth. Number 2, change the names and identifying details. So if you're worried about hurting someone's reputation, just change their name. You might even change their gender. You could change their age. You can change everything. If you're afraid that people who know that person will be like, oh man, that was totally Mary Jane, then maybe you need to change that role a little bit more than just their name or something. But change the identifying details, and that sometimes will get you through. Number 3, get permission. And ultimately, this is probably the best option, in my opinion, if you plan to share private information about somebody and they've had a big impact on your life and you want them in your memoir, then ask them. Say, hey, I really want to share this story about where we accidentally hit a deer in the road. And I, you know, because it had a major impact on me, I just want to make sure, are you okay if I share that? That's all you have to do. And, you know, if you're concerned, you may want to have it in writing, but realistically, just get permission. That, because that's really what most people want, is to have the respect given to them, that you're not just doing it without talking to them first. Number 4, be cautious with criticism. Now, if you plan to criticize someone in your memoir, make sure that it's fair or solid facts. If they smoke like a chimney, you may want to tone that down, or you know, just unless they're the ones that say they smoke like a chimney. You know, there's different things that are okay and not okay. Just be really cautious with the criticism, because when people see something in writing, it kind of touches them in a different way, and you may not intend for it to be hurtful, but sometimes it is. Number 5, be careful with humor. I know this seems silly, but humor, you have to be careful, because jokes can sometimes be misinterpreted, taken out of context, especially if you're using sarcastic humor. A lot of people totally speak sarcasm, and they would love to read something, you know, funny sarcasm. But you have to be careful, because if it's about someone and you're being funny, then they may feel like you're making fun of them instead of laughing at a scenario. And again, just take their feelings into consideration with that. Number 6, use caution with sensitive topics. Now, when you're talking about politics, religion, your kids, you know, gosh, reproductive health, anything like that, be mindful of how your words might be perceived by others. It may not even be someone that you're talking about in your memoir. It may be just that your reader might take it wrong. So that doesn't necessarily mean that your reader is going to sue you, but your reader might be offended, and you don't want that either. Number 7, fact check everything. Literally, go through your, you know, the years. Make sure that if you're talking about specifics of anything, always give everything to the best of your knowledge, the best of your recollection, and do your best to fact check. Now, I also would recommend, and you should definitely reach out to a legal representative about this, but there should be some sort of disclaimer on a memoir that says, you know, this is not intended to misalign or, you know, hold anybody in a light that is not positive, you know, something like that. Definitely get your own verbiage, but have some sort of a disclaimer that says it's not my intention to hurt anybody, because that is something that's important. Even if others have hurt you, you want to make sure that you're not spreading the pain. You need to talk about the healing and the journey and how you got out of a dark place. You definitely don't want to have a book out there that is spewing poison. Okay. And that's just, if you're not healed yet, then only share the parts that have made it through the other side. Just because sometimes the pain can spread more pain. So let your pain be healing. Obviously, number 8, consult a lawyer. If you're unsure about any aspect of if what you've written could be considered libel or defamatory, or anything, unethical. Consult an attorney, especially if you can find one who specializes in publishing law. Really, it's just better to have someone have your back with that. Number 9, be prepared to defend your work. Now, what I mean by that is if you say that you were sexually assaulted by this person at age 11 in 1974, I'm totally making all this up, but if that happened and that person says, that's crap, that didn't happen, you would want to have police records that prove that it was. Things like that are pretty serious. It may be better to not name a person. Just talk about your part of the scenario and tell your story. You can totally get to your reader by giving all of the details that you're comfortable with giving, but not that personal information. So just be really careful about that. But if you name anything like that, be ready to defend your work, because it's much more likely that someone will come after you for that. And then number 10, use your judgment. Ultimately, the best way to avoid libel or defamation in your memoir is just to be mindful of how your words might affect others. Understanding your own rights and where the lines are drawn is an important part of writing your memoir. Not only is it important, but it also is your responsibility. You're actually responsible for this. So take it seriously. You want your memoir to be fully authentic and honest. So your story is your story, but you don't want to necessarily harm other people. So just be really careful about that. By doing your own additional research, following tips, and being mindful of how your words might hurt others, you can tell your story in a way that both is honest and respectful. So with all that said, we made it through. Let's get to writing and do it responsibly. All right, so going a little bit deeper in this, I just want to talk about protecting privacy and obtaining permission. So we're going to talk about the importance of the topic when it comes to writing your personal memoir, of protecting others' privacy and obtaining permission to use content about them. So when you're writing your memoir, it's super important to remember that you have the responsibility to protect the privacy of others in your life. Now, you may have the right to tell your story, but you also have the responsibility to respect the rights of others. So how do you do that? Here's your top 10 tips. And obviously, top of it should be to use some common sense, but we're going to say number 1, obtain permission. If you plan to use or include their information about someone, anyone in your memoir, get their permission first. Number 2, change the names and identifying details. If you're worried about violating someone's privacy, consider changing their name or other identifying details in your memoir so that it's not suspected that it's them. Number 3, be cautious with sensitive information. Now, protecting their sensitive information is definitely a legal consideration. You want to make sure that you don't expose someone else's sensitive information. It could hurt them, it could hurt their loved ones, and it could lead to legal issues. Number 4, use discretion with personal information. Again, this is pretty much what I just said. If it's not relevant to your story, that, let's say, someone is 280 pounds, they're not going to want you to tell the world that, unless they have been open and, vocal about it themselves. And then even then, you still would ask them their permission. It's their information to share, not yours. Unless it's directly pertinent to your story, it's best to just leave it out. Use discretion with this personal information. It really is something that you just make a thought process, and you're like, no, I don't need to say that. No, I don't need to say that. And your story is just as strong without it. Number 5, consider the impact on others. Before sharing the information about someone in your memoir, ask yourself, how is it going to impact them? How is it, will their reputation be tarnished? Will their personal life be impacted? These things matter to somebody, even if they don't matter to you. So, and I'm not saying they don't, but just be very cautious. Number 6, stick to the facts. When you're writing a memoir, you really need it to be honest and authentic. And I say that a lot, but it really is important because you don't want someone else to be seen by the reading public, that person is somehow judged or is not a good person. It's not nice, and it potentially isn't true, because typically when we're writing a memoir, it's about our opinion and our feelings. So you have to be careful about things like that, but stick to the facts. Number 7, be respectful. When writing about someone in your memoir, just be respectful and avoid making negative or hurtful statements. If somebody is always negative, maybe you want to fictionalize that character's name. You can have a negative friend, just don't tell the world that it's Alicia Smith, whoever. Don't name her. You can absolutely have that negative friend. 8, avoid stereotypes. This is really important. I have opinions that I'm going to keep to myself, but avoid stereotypes. When you write about other people who are of different races or genders or cultures, just there's no reason to add a stereotype in there or make broad generalizations. It hurts the person, but it hurts everybody, because it shows different things about your perspective. It does add depth to your character if you make a slur or something like that. But that's not the character you want to deepen. Just be really careful with stuff like that. And then 9, consult a lawyer. I am going to say that probably another 2 or 3 times before we're done with this chapter, just because it is really important to protect yourself, protect your interest, your financial situation, and just make sure that you're not hurting anybody and you're not hurting yourself. Use your judgment, number 10. Just be a good judge of what you've put down on paper. If you absolutely swear that it's right, then do it. Do it. But know that you may have to defend it. You may have a fight, but it's yours. It's your story to tell, as long as it's true. All right, guys, we're going to move on to the next section. All right. Whew. So this is less about legal and more about just ethics and the common sense. So we're going to talk about balancing truth and fiction here. Now, this is one of those things where it's important because this is a personal memoir. So you're going to have your opinions come up. You're going to have what you believe was true come up, and you need to be able to tell your story from your perspective. But doing that, you need to be able to balance your truth and fiction, and just make sure that you know the difference so that you can then convey that properly. I like the use of, in my opinion. I believe, if you use phrases like that, then you can say, this is only my opinion, but this is what I thought. And that will, in my opinion, protect you more than, just you becoming this vindictive person who is just spewing poison. So keep that in mind. But again, consult your attorney. But when you're writing a memoir, it can be tempting to take some creative liberties because you want your story to be exciting. It doesn't need to be, like on this corner, yeah, or a 3-ring circus. It just doesn't need to be that exciting. It needs to be compelling. It needs to be emotional. It needs to be real and authentic. Those are the things that it needs to be. So you're going to be tempted to take some creative liberties and make things more exciting or more interesting. But just remember that that's not really what you need. So number one, on how to avoid crossing the line of going into fiction on a memoir is just stick to the facts. The best way to avoid fiction in your memoir is by making sure that what you say is what really happened. Number two, be honest about your emotions. Your emotions and how you felt as you went through your journey. That's what people want to read about. They want to read about you and get to know you and how your life was impacted. So be honest about your emotions. Be open about all of that. And that's really what's going to get your reader to engage. Number three, be descriptive in your language. So literally use the sensory words. Just be be descriptive is the only thing I can say. Number four, be honest about your perspective. Remember that this is your memoir and it's just one perspective and it's yours. And that's okay. So you are allowed to share your opinion, but be honest that it's your point of view, it's your opinion. And that is something that I believe most people will respect when you say, well, I believe, and people will appreciate that you said, this is not necessarily 100% fact. Number five, avoid making assumptions. Now, don't make assumptions about what other people were thinking or feeling unless you have the evidence to support what you're claiming. You, like, say, you broke up with someone and your best friend thought that you were an idiot for breaking up, and you thought that she actually wanted to go out with him instead. Don't make that assertion unless you can somehow back it up. Just don't make that assumption. Don't make the claim. Just avoid it. Avoid it. And then number six, fact check everything. Make sure that you fact check all your information in your memoir just to ensure that it's accurate and truthful, whether it's timelines, situations. And number seven, I'm going to run into that one real quick because I love this one. Consult other sources. Now, if you're unsure about a particular fact or event, consider consulting other sources to confirm the information. Now, by that, I mean, ask your best friend from back then. Find them on Facebook and say, hey, I just remembered this situation. I'm writing my memoir. And do you remember when I was dating Bubba and we broke up? And I remember thinking that because you yelled at me for breaking up with him, but I kind of got the feeling that you wanted to go out with him. And, did you? And talk about it, laugh about it, enjoy asking other people, because that's one of the really great things about doing your memoir is you have the opportunity to get those questions you had answered. Don't make it accusational. Make it, hey, it's good to see you. I haven't talked to you in a while. Facebook and social media as a whole is just a really great tool to use to get back in touch with some people. I remember, and I'm going way off on a tangent here, but I remember when I first started reconnecting with high school friends, and it was funny because some people would say, "Oh gosh, I had such a crush on you," and then I would be the one saying to some people, "Oh gosh, I had such a crush on you," and it's funny because you never knew. And just getting in touch with people again, that's one of the really great aspects of doing your own memoir, is getting back into your memories and closing uh, any areas that need closure and different things like that. So consult other sources is a really, really big part of making sure that, one, you don't get yourself in trouble, but also that you really benefit personally from doing your own memoir. Now, I'll rein it back in because I didn't mean to get that off track, but it really is, consulting other sources is a really big deal. Number 8, be transparent about any changes that you make. If you make changes to the facts in your memoir, be transparent about what you changed and why. So if your friend slapped you in a fight, and you say that she tripped you instead, anything. If you're changing the fact and you're changing the fact, just tell your friend, hey, I said this because I didn't want it to sound like you were actually, being mean. I wanted it to be clear that you tripped me and it was playful or something, whatever the situation is. Just have a conversation with people. And if you're not in their life anymore or they're not in your life anymore, then just either stick to the truth or make sure that it's a harmless liberty that you're taking there. And of course, 9, use your best judgment. Ultimately, the best way to balance truth and fiction in your memoir is to use your best judgment. Be mindful of how your words can affect and be perceived by others. 10, consider the impact on the other people. And before you share something, consider, is it going to hurt them? Is it going to hurt their feelings? Is it going to hurt their reputation? Things like that will come back to you. Now, I hope that this has been helpful. It is your responsibility to be open and honest and absolutely truthful in a memoir, because a memoir is based on your true story. That is the expectation of a memoir. So if you're going to throw some fiction in there, be very careful about it. And I would put a something in the front of the book and an introduction or something that says parts of this have been fictionalized. If you say that, then it may take away from your true story, but at least then your reader knows, okay, now they're going to wonder, was this part true or was this part fiction? And that's okay as long as you're open and honest about it. All right, guys, let's get moving on to the next section. All right, so now we're going to talk about the top 10 tips for navigating legal and ethical issues. So let's talk about an important topic when it comes to writing a personal memoir, navigating legal and ethical issues. So when you're writing a personal memoir, there are a number of legal and ethical issues that you really need to be aware of, from copyright infringement to libel to invasion of privacy. There's just a lot of pitfalls to avoid. So how do you navigate these issues and avoid legal trouble? Well, here's the top 10 that I have in a list for you, but understand, I am not an attorney. I am not offering legal advice. See, when you do a disclaimer like that, you make it someone else's responsibility to become responsible for their own actions. So one of the things that you need to do in this is learn about disclaimers, but let's go into our top 10. Number 1, understand the law. You don't have to be an attorney, but you do need to familiarize yourself with relevant laws and regulations governing publishing, copyright, defamation, things like that. It's just intelligent and very wise to understand the law to protect yourself. Number 2, obtain permissions. If you plan to use quotes, lyrics, or other copyrighted content in your memoir, you need to make sure that you have the necessary permissions. Number 3, protect privacy. Be mindful of the privacy of people in your life and take steps to protect their identities and their personal information. You're there to tell your story, not their story. Number 4, avoid libel. Don't make false statements about people in your memoir that could be considered defamatory. Number 5, use disclaimers. Remember when I said that a little bit sooner? Consider including a disclaimer at the beginning of your memoir to make it clear that your story is from your perspective. It's your opinion and what you remember. Use that as a disclaimer so that nobody believes that you are making assertions about other people. Number 6, be respectful. When writing about people in your memoir, be respectful. Avoid making negative or hurtful statements. If it doesn't need to be said, then go with Bambi's mom. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. Your memoir is your story. Number 7, consult an attorney. If you're unsure about something that you've written and you want to know if it might be a violation of someone else's rights, talk to an attorney about it. Protect yourself before something comes at you. Number 8, always fact check everything. Make sure that the information that you provide in your memoir is true and accurate. If it is portrayed as fact, make sure it is fact. Number 9, be transparent. If you make changes about the facts in your memoir, be transparent about that. In where you would have your disclaimer or other information like in an introduction, just say, some of this is fiction, some of it is fact. You might say, I'll let you be I'll let you guess about it or something like that. But make sure that you're very clear. If there's fiction in there, that your reader knows that there is fiction in there. And then number 10, use your best judgment. Ultimately, the best way to navigate legal issues is, be mindful. Be mindful of the law, how you convey yourself, that you're using opinions and perspectives as opposed to facts, unless you know and can defend that they are facts. So just remember, you can tell your story in a way that is both engaging and legally sound. So let's get out there, get writing, but do it legally.